The heat pressed down on Natchez like a suffocating hand that summer of 1844. Along the bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River, the Harrow Plantation stretched across 2,000 acres of cotton fields that turned the earth white as bone. The mansion stood at the center, 3 stories of columned arrogance that cast long shadows over the quarters, where 300 souls labored from dawn until their bodies gave out. Benjamin Cross arrived on a Tuesday in chains. The slave traders brought him upriver from New Orleans on a flatboat, and the moment he stepped onto the dock, every overseer on the landing stopped what they were doing. He stood 6.5 feet tall, shoulders broad as an ox yoke, his dark skin marked with scars that told stories he never spoke aloud. His eyes held something that made grown men uncomfortable, a stillness that suggested violence held in perfect check. "This one's a fighter," the trader said to Silas Harrow, spitting tobacco juice onto the weathered planks. "Strong as 3 men, but you'll need to break him proper. Had him in irons the whole way up from Louisiana. Tried to throw himself overboard twice." Silas Harrow circled Benjamin slowly, examining him like livestock. Harrow was a thin man, with a face carved by cruelty and greed, dressed in a white suit that never seemed to stain despite the red dust that covered everything else. "Can he work?" Harrow asked. "Work ain't the question, it's whether you can control him." Harrow smiled, showing teeth yellowed by whiskey and tobacco. "I can control anything that bleeds." They put Benjamin in the fields under the watch of Wade Tucker, the head overseer, a man whose reputation for brutality extended across 3 counties. Tucker carried a bullwhip coiled at his belt like a sleeping serpent, and he took pleasure in reminding the enslaved that their lives held no more value than the cotton they picked. That first week, Benjamin said nothing to anyone. He worked in silence, moving through the rows with mechanical precision, filling his sack faster than any 2 men combined. The other field workers watched him with curiosity and caution. Tell me in the comments which country you are from and what you thought of this story. And if this story made an impression on you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future stories. His presence changed something in the air, like the pressure drop before a storm. On Sunday, the only half-day of rest they received, an old woman named Sarah approached Benjamin near the well behind the quarters. She was 70 if she was a day, bent from decades in the fields, but her eyes remained sharp. "You got the look," she said, drawing water. "Seen it before, in men who don't plan on staying." Benjamin glanced at her but didn't respond. "They're gonna try to break you," Sarah continued. "That's what Harrow does. He don't just want your labor, he wants your spirit ground into the dirt." "Then he'll be disappointed," Benjamin said. His voice was deep, resonant, like distant thunder. Sarah studied him. "You believe in God, son?" "I believe in iron," Benjamin replied. "Iron bars, iron chains, iron will. The rest is just words people use to make themselves feel better about what they do to each other." The old woman nodded slowly. "Maybe. But iron alone won't get you free. This place got a darkness in it older than Harrow, older than these fields. You feel it yet?" Benjamin turned to look at her fully for the first time. "I feel lots of things, most of them angry. Anger's good, keeps you alive, but you're gonna need more than anger when the time comes." Before he could ask what she meant, the bell rang, calling them back to the fields for the afternoon work. Sarah limped away, leaving Benjamin with questions he couldn't yet form into words. The break came on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after Benjamin's arrival. Tucker was making his rounds through the fields, the midday sun turning the cotton plants into shimmering white phantoms. He stopped near a row where a young boy, maybe 12 years old, struggled with his sack. The child's name was Moses, and he'd been sick with fever the week before, his small body still weak. "You slowing down, boy?" Tucker's voice cut through the humid air. Moses kept his head down, fingers working faster through the bowls. "No, sir, I'm working, sir." "Don't look like working to me. Looks like laziness." Tucker grabbed Moses by the shoulder and spun him around. The boy's sack was only half full. In one smooth motion, Tucker drew his whip back, the leather uncoiling like a striking snake. The crack never came. Benjamin's hand caught Tucker's wrist, mid-swing, his grip like an iron vice. The entire field went silent. 300 people stopped breathing at once. "Let go of me, nigger," Tucker hissed, his face purpling with rage and something that might have been fear. "He's a child," Benjamin said quietly. "He's sick. He's working as fast as he can. I said let go." Benjamin's eyes never left Tucker's face. "No." The word hung in the air like smoke. In the hierarchy of the plantation, what Benjamin had just done was unthinkable. Slaves didn't touch overseers. They didn't say no. They didn't challenge the order that kept the whole rotten system functioning. Tucker tried to wrench his arm free, but Benjamin's grip didn't budge. The overseer's eyes widened with the realization that he couldn't break loose, that this man holding him possessed strength beyond anything natural. "You just signed your death warrant," Tucker said. "Maybe," Benjamin replied, "but the boy walks away." He released Tucker's wrist and stepped back, placing himself between the overseer and Moses. For a long moment nothing happened. The sun beat down. The cotton plants rustled in a breeze that carried the sweet rot smell of the river. Then Tucker smiled, and it was worse than his anger. "Get back to work," he said to Moses, his voice eerily calm. "You," he pointed at Benjamin, "come with me." They took him to the forge. The plantation blacksmith shop stood near the stables, a squat building of brick and timber that radiated heat like the mouth of hell. They dragged Benjamin inside, 6 overseers restraining him, though he didn't resist. He'd known this was coming the moment he grabbed Tucker's wrist. Silas Harrow was waiting inside, along with Tucker and 5 other white men whose faces Benjamin didn't recognize. The forge burned bright, coals glowing red and orange, metal tools hanging on the walls like instruments of torture. "You think you're special," Harrow said, circling Benjamin like a predator. "You think because you're strong, because you can outwork 3 men, that makes you different. But you're not different. You're property, my property, and property that doesn't know its place needs to be reminded." They forced Benjamin to his knees. Tucker heated iron cuffs in the forge until they glowed like small suns. When they clamped them around Benjamin's wrists, his flesh sizzled and the smell of burning skin filled the shop. Benjamin's jaw tightened, but he made no sound. "You don't scream." Harrow seemed almost disappointed. "Everyone screams." They drove iron spikes through the cuffs into the hard-packed dirt floor, pinning Benjamin's arms to the ground. 12 men worked in rotation, hammering the spikes deeper, creating a prison of his own body. They chained his ankles. They weighted his shoulders with iron bars. Through it all, Benjamin remained silent. He looked at each man as they worked, memorizing their faces, their voices, the way they moved. His breathing stayed calm and measured, like he was merely resting rather than being tortured. "Leave him," Harrow finally said. 3 days ought to teach him his place. No water, no food. Let's see how strong he is when the sun comes up tomorrow." They filed out, leaving Benjamin alone in the forge, bound by enough iron to anchor a ship. The door closed. Darkness fell. In the quarters that night, no one spoke of what happened. Fear kept them silent, but underneath the fear ran a current of something else. Hope, maybe, or the memory of what hope felt like. Sarah sat in her cabin, staring at the candle flame, praying to gods both Christian and older, gods whose names she'd learned from her grandmother, gods who predated the ships and the chains. "If you're listening," she whispered, "now would be a good time to show yourself." Dawn came slowly, painting the eastern sky in shades of blood, orange and purple. Tucker led the procession back to the forge, Harrow beside him, both men eager to see what remained of Benjamin Cross after a night bound in iron. Tucker pulled the door open. The forge was empty. The iron cuffs lay on the ground, split clean through as if they'd been made of dried clay rather than tempered steel. The spikes had been ripped from the earth, the holes they left behind smoking slightly in the cool morning air. The door to the forge, a heavy thing of oak and iron hinges, hung twisted off its frame. On the ground where Benjamin had been pinned, arranged with deliberate care, lay the chains and cuffs twisted together into the shape of a cross. When Tucker reached down to touch them, he jerked his hand back with a curse. They were still warm. Benjamin Cross was gone. The alarm bell rang across Harrow Plantation before the sun fully cleared the horizon. Its frantic clanging brought every overseer, every field hand, every house servant rushing from their quarters. Silas Harrow stood outside the forge, his face pale despite the heat already building in the Mississippi air, staring at the twisted metal cross on the ground. "Find him," Harrow said, his voice tight. "I want every man with a gun. Search every cabin, every field, every inch of this plantation." He couldn't have gotten far. Tucker organized the search party, 12 white men on horseback armed with rifles and hunting dogs. They combed through the quarters first, dragging people from their beds, overturning furniture, tearing through meager possessions. The enslaved stood in groups, watching in silence as their homes were violated, but their eyes held something new. A flicker of defiance, quickly hidden but unmistakably present. They found nothing. No trace of Benjamin, no sign of which direction he'd fled. The dogs picked up his scent at the forge, but lost it 50 yards away, near the edge of the cotton fields. The animals whined and pulled back, refusing to follow the trail further, their handlers cursing and yanking on the leashes. "Damn useless mutts," Tucker spat. "He's on foot, probably headed for the river. We'll catch him before noon." But noon came and went, then sunset, then another dawn. Benjamin Cross had vanished like smoke, leaving behind only questions and the twisted iron cross that no one dared move from where it lay. On the third day, they found Cyrus Webb. Webb was one of Tucker's lieutenants, a thick-shouldered man who took particular pleasure in his work. He'd been part of the group that hammered the spikes through Benjamin's cuffs. They discovered him in the North cane field just after sunrise, his body lying face up between the rows, neck bent at an unnatural angle. His eyes were open, staring at the pale morning sky. His hands were clasped on his chest. Someone had positioned him carefully, almost respectfully, like a body laid out for burial. But the message was clear in the way his neck had been broken with surgical precision. This was no accident. This was judgment. "Get the sheriff," Harrow said, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "And double the patrols. I want men on watch all night." Sheriff Raymond Coulter arrived from Natchez that afternoon, a florid man with a tobacco-stained beard and a reputation for brutality that exceeded even Tucker's. He examined Webb's body with professional detachment, then turned to Harrow. "You got yourself a rebellion brewing," Coulter said. "One rogue slave, that's a problem. One dead overseer, that's war. You need to make an example, and you need to do it fast, or every plantation from here to Vicksburg will have trouble." "I'm trying to find the man," Harrow snapped. "He's disappeared like a ghost." "Then you find someone else. Pick the troublemakers, the ones who won't meet your eye, the ones who work near this Benjamin Cross. String up a few of them, make it public. Send the message that this kind of thing won't be tolerated." In the quarters that night, fear rippled through the cabins like a contagion. Everyone knew what was coming. Collective punishment was the master's favorite tool, making the innocent suffer for the sins of one, to keep everyone in line through terror. Sarah gathered a small group in her cabin after the overseers finished their evening rounds. 6 people sat in the darkness, speaking in whispers barely louder than breath. "They gonna hang someone," said Jacob, a middle-aged man who worked the mill. "Maybe more than one. They gotta show they still in control." "Benjamin killed Webb," another voice said. "He brought this on us." "Benjamin defended a child," Sarah said sharply, "and he did what every one of us has dreamed of doing. Don't you dare blame him for their evil." "But where is he?" a young woman named Rachel asked. "If he's going to start a rebellion, why did he run?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think he ran. I think he's still here." The others stared at her in the dim candlelight. "That's crazy," Jacob said. "They searched everywhere." Did they search the old tunnel?" Sarah asked. The cabin went silent. The old tunnel was plantation legend, a story passed down through generations. Supposedly, long before Harrow bought the land, before it was even a plantation, the property had been something else. Some said it was a French fort, others claimed it was built by native tribes. Whatever the truth, there were stories of passages beneath the earth, chambers hidden in the bluffs overlooking the river. Most people dismissed it as myth, but Sarah had been on this land longer than anyone, and she remembered things others had forgotten. "You know where it is," Rachel whispered. "I know where it might be," Sarah said. "And if Benjamin found it, if he's down there, he's got a fortress. They'll never find him." "Then what's his plan?" Jacob asked. "Hide forever? Pick off overseers one by one?" "I don't know his plan," Sarah admitted. "But I know what I saw in his eyes. That man wasn't running. He was hunting." 4 days after Webb's death, they found Marcus Stone. Stone had been the one who heated the iron cuffs in the forge, who'd laughed as Benjamin's flesh burned. They discovered him behind the stables at dawn, his body positioned the same way as Webb's, neck broken, eyes open, hands folded on his chest. The pattern was becoming clear. 1 man every 3 days, always at dawn, always positioned with eerie care, and always one of the 12 who'd been in the forge that night. Panic spread through the remaining overseers like wildfire. The men who'd participated in Benjamin's torture suddenly found themselves marked, waiting for death to come calling. They traveled in groups, refused to work alone, slept in shifts with loaded rifles beside their beds. Harrow brought in more men from town, hired guns and slave catchers, men with reputations for violence. They set traps in the fields, positioned sentries with orders to shoot anything that moved after dark. The plantation became an armed camp, everyone jumpy, everyone suspicious. But it did no good. On day 7 they found Thomas Ridley in the cotton gin house, same broken neck, same careful positioning. Ridley had been one of the men holding Benjamin's shoulders while they drove the spikes through the cuffs. On day 10, Daniel Cooper in the tobacco barn. He'd hammered one of the ankle chains. On day 13, James Hartford in the corn crib. He'd brought the iron bars that weighted Benjamin's shoulders. The mathematics of vengeance were simple and terrifying. 12 men had tortured Benjamin Cross. 12 men were going to die. 1 every 3 days, dawn after dawn, an execution schedule as regular as clockwork. Tucker gathered the 7 remaining overseers who'd been in the forge. They met in Harrow's study, curtains drawn, rifles loaded, everyone's nerves frayed to breaking. "This can't continue," said Peter Marsh, a young overseer who'd only recently taken the job. His hands shook as he poured whiskey from Harrow's decanter. 5 men dead, and we haven't even seen him. It's like he's a damn ghost." "He's no ghost," Tucker said, though his voice lacked conviction. "He's flesh and blood can be killed." "Then where is he?" Marsh demanded. "We've searched every building, every field, brought in dogs, set traps. It's like he doesn't exist, except when he's killing us." "The tunnel," Harrow said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "There's an old tunnel system in the bluffs. French colonists built it in the 1730s, before the plantation. My grandfather sealed the entrances when he bought the land, but if someone knew where to look—" "You think he's living underground?" Tucker asked. "I think it's the only explanation that makes sense. He's using the tunnels to move around unseen, coming up at night to hunt, then disappearing back into the earth." "Then we smoke him out," Tucker said. "Find the entrances, pour pitch and oil down there, set it on fire, burn him alive." "And risk burning down half the plantation?" Harrow shook his head. "No. We do this smart. We use bait." In the quarters, word spread quickly that Harrow was planning something. Sarah called another meeting in her cabin, this time including nearly 20 people, everyone crammed into the small space, the air thick with sweat and fear and desperate hope. "They're going to use one of us as bait," Jacob said. "Probably someone Benjamin knows, someone he might try to save." "The boy," Rachel said. "Moses." The child Benjamin protected. They'll hurt him to draw Benjamin out. Sarah's weathered face grew hard. Then we need to move first. Move how? Someone asked. What can we do? We got no weapons, no plan, and Benjamin's somewhere we can't reach him. We can reach him, Sarah said. I know we can, and I know someone who might know how. She was looking at a thin man in the corner, someone most people barely noticed. His name was Elijah, and he was simple-minded, or so everyone thought. He spent his days wandering the plantation, talking to himself, doing odd jobs that required no skill. The overseers ignored him, considering him harmless. But Sarah had watched Elijah for weeks now. She'd seen him disappear for hours at a time, returning with dirt under his fingernails and a strange smile on his face. She'd heard him humming songs that seemed to have no end, circular melodies that made her skin prickle. Elijah, Sarah said gently, you've seen him, haven't you? Benjamin, you know where he is. The cabin went quiet. Elijah's eyes, usually vacant and unfocused, suddenly sharpened. He looked at Sarah, and for a moment she saw intelligence there, cunning, something that had been hidden beneath a carefully maintained disguise. The earth keeps secrets, Elijah said, his voice different now, clearer. Old secrets. The French dug deep, but they didn't dig first. Others were here before, carved chambers in the bluffs when the world was young. Benjamin found the old places, the dark places, the places where the river talks. Can you take us to him? Sarah asked. Us? Elijah smiled, showing gaps in his teeth. No, just you, just the old woman who remembers the old ways. He's waiting for you. He's been waiting. Tucker's plan went into motion the next morning. They brought Moses to the center of the quarters, tied him to a post in the common area where everyone could see. The boy was terrified, tears streaming down his face, calling for his mother. This is what happens when one of you breaks the rules, Tucker announced, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. This child suffers for Benjamin Cross's sins, and he'll keep suffering until Cross shows himself, or until we've made our point. He raised his whip. The enslaved people stood frozen, rage and helplessness warring on their faces. Tucker drew back for the first strike. The whip never fell. A rock struck Tucker's hand with perfect accuracy, numbing his fingers and sending the whip flying. Another rock hit Peter Marsh in the temple, dropping him where he stood. Suddenly, the air was full of stones, thrown with deadly precision from the crowd, not in a wild barrage, but with calculated targeting. Chaos erupted. The overseers fired their rifles, but the crowd scattered, people running in every direction. In the confusion, someone cut Moses free and spirited him away. When Tucker tried to give chase, he found himself surrounded by elderly women who moved with surprising coordination, blocking his path, forcing him back. By the time order was restored, Moses was gone. So were several other people, including Sarah and Elijah, and in the center of the common area where Moses had been tied, someone had drawn a symbol in the dirt with their foot. A cross, twisted like iron, the same shape as the chains Benjamin had left behind. Tucker stared at it, his hand throbbing where the rock had struck. For the first time in his brutal career, he felt something he'd only inflicted on others. Fear. Sarah followed Elijah through the darkness, her old bones protesting every step. They'd slipped away during the chaos, moving through the cotton fields as the sun set, heading toward the bluffs that overlooked the Mississippi River. The earth here was ancient, layered with centuries of sediment and secrets, cut through with ravines and caves worn by water and time. Elijah moved with surprising grace for someone who usually shuffled and stumbled. He led Sarah down a narrow path between limestone outcroppings, past blackberry brambles that tore at her dress, into a gully where a creek had carved deep channels in the stone. Here, Elijah said, stopping at what looked like a solid rock face covered in kudzu and wild grapevines. He pushed aside the vegetation, revealing a gap in the stone barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Cool air breathed out from the opening, carrying the smell of deep earth and water. "You been coming here?" Sarah asked. "Since I was a boy," Elijah said. "My grandmother showed me before she died. Said these caves go back to the old times, before the white men, before the ships. Said there's power here for those who know how to listen." Sarah studied his face in the fading light. "You ain't simple at all, are you?" Elijah's expression was hard to read. "Simple keeps you alive. Simple means they don't watch you, don't worry about you, let you go places and see things. I've been watching this plantation for 40 years, learning its secrets. When Benjamin came, I knew he was different. Knew he'd need the old places eventually, so I showed him." "How long he been down here?" "Since that first night. He didn't run. He went down." Sarah squeezed through the opening, Elijah following with a torch he'd lit from a flint and steel he kept hidden in his ragged clothes. The passage opened into a larger chamber, the ceiling lost in darkness above them. The walls showed marks of tools, chisel cuts made by hands long dead, patterns and symbols that predated any European language. "This way," Elijah said, leading her deeper. They descended through a series of chambers, each connected by narrow passages that forced them to crawl in places. Sarah's breath came harder, her heart pounding with exertion and anticipation. The torch cast wild shadows on the walls, making the ancient marks seem to move and shift. Finally, they emerged into a vast cavern where the Mississippi River had carved a cathedral in the stone. Water flowed through channels in the floor, the sound echoing off walls that stretched up into blackness. And in the center, beside a small fire built from driftwood, sat Benjamin Cross. He looked different than Sarah remembered. His clothes were torn and stained, his body marked with burns from the iron cuffs that were only partially healed, but his eyes held the same calm intensity, and when he saw Sarah, he stood with fluid grace. "Sister Sarah," he said. His voice echoed in the chamber. "I was wondering if you'd come." "You've been busy," Sarah said, lowering herself carefully onto a flat stone near the fire. "5 overseers dead, 7 more waiting their turn." "5 men who tortured me," Benjamin corrected, "who would have killed me and thought nothing of it. I'm simply returning the favor." "That what you call it? Favor?" Benjamin stirred the fire with a stick, sparks rising toward the invisible ceiling. "I call it justice. They call it murder. The words don't matter. The result is the same." Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying him. "You gonna kill all 12? That's the plan. And then what? You think Harrow's gonna let that stand? You think they won't burn the quarters, hang a dozen innocent people to make their point? They were going to do that anyway," Benjamin said. "That's what they do. They terrorize, they brutalize, they maintain their power through fear. I'm just turning that fear around, showing them what it feels like to be hunted." "But you ain't just hunting them," Sarah said. "You're endangering everyone here. They use Moses as bait today, a child. They're desperate, and desperate men do terrible things." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "Is the boy safe?" "For now. But tomorrow, next week, they'll try again. They'll keep trying until they get you, or until they've punished enough innocent people that you give yourself up. Then I need to finish this faster." "Or," Sarah said carefully, "you need to think beyond revenge." "You're strong, Benjamin, stronger than any man I've seen. But strength ain't enough. You want to really hurt Harrow? You want to really change things? You need to think bigger than just killing his overseers." Benjamin looked at her, firelight reflecting in his eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "Freedom," Sarah said simply. "Not just for you, for all of us. You got everyone's attention now. They're scared, they're confused, they don't know what you're going to do next. Use that. Turn this from revenge into revolution." "Revolution." Benjamin laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "You know how many slave revolts have succeeded, Sarah? None. 0. They always end the same way, with bodies hanging from trees and laws made even more brutal to make sure it never happens again. Maybe because those revolts were about anger," Sarah said. Just anger, with no plan, no strategy. You're different. You think, you plan. You move like a ghost, strike like lightning. You got something no other rebellion had. What's that? Fear. Real fear, the kind that makes men question everything. They don't understand you, Benjamin. They can't figure out how you're doing what you're doing. That makes you powerful in ways that go beyond your strength. Elijah, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. She's right. I've been listening to them talk. The overseers, the field hands, everyone. You're becoming something more than a man in their minds. You're becoming a symbol, a ghost, a judgment. The enslaved people are starting to hope and the masters are starting to doubt. That's when real change becomes possible. Benjamin was silent for a long time, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. I'm not a symbol. I'm just a man who's tired of being treated like an animal. Then be both, Sarah said. Be the man and the symbol. Use what you started here to build something bigger. How? I'm one person. I can kill overseers, sure, but I can't free 300 people. I can't fight the entire system. No, Sarah agreed, but you can make them free themselves. You can show them it's possible. You can create chaos, confusion, opportunity. And when the moment comes, when the masters are looking the wrong way, when their fear has them paralyzed, that's when we move. Benjamin looked at her with new respect. You've been thinking about this. For 40 years, Sarah said. Since I watched my daughter sold away when she was 10. Since I watched my husband beaten to death for looking at an overseer wrong. Since I watched 300 people have their humanity stripped away every single day. Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I just never had the right spark to light the fire. She gestured at Benjamin. You're the spark. The question is whether you're gonna burn out in revenge or whether you're gonna start a fire that can't be put out. In the cavern's darkness, water dripped steadily from somewhere above, counting out seconds like a heartbeat. Benjamin stood and walked to the edge of the underground river, looking at his reflection in the dark water. I've got 7 more names on my list, he finally said. 7 men who need to answer for what they did. Then make them answer in a way that serves more than revenge, Sarah said. Make them answer in a way that breaks this place open and gives everyone a chance at freedom. You make it sound simple. It ain't simple, it's probably impossible. But impossible is just another kind of chain, and you already broke those. Benjamin turned back to face them, and Sarah saw decision crystallizing in his eyes. Tell me your plan. Sarah smiled, showing the gaps where she'd lost teeth over decades of hard labor and harder living. First, we need to talk about the weapons they don't know we have. Over the next hour, Sarah laid out everything she'd learned in 40 years of watching, listening, and remembering. The old maps that showed Confederate ammunition stores from the earlier wars, the schedule of the supply wagons that came from Natchez every week, the names of the white men in town who secretly hated slavery but were too afraid to speak openly, the underground network of free blacks and sympathetic Quakers who helped runaways make it north. Most importantly, she told him about the weakness in Harrow's empire that few people recognized. The plantation ran on credit, massive loans from banks in Natchez and New Orleans. Harrow was land-rich but cash-poor, depending on each year's cotton crop to stay ahead of his debts. Miss even one season, and the whole structure would collapse. Cotton's got to be picked, processed, and shipped, Sarah explained. Every step requires labor, timing, coordination. You disrupt that system at the right moment, and Harrow loses everything. And a broke plantation owner can't hold slaves. So we sabotage the crop? Not yet, too early. But we make them think we might. We make them worry about it. We make them deploy their resources, protecting cotton instead of hunting you. And while they're looking at the fields, we prepare for the real move. Which is? Sarah glanced at Elijah, who nodded slightly. The tunnel system connects to the river, right? That means boats can reach it? Small boats, yes, Elijah confirmed. At certain times when the water's high enough. Then we use that, Sarah said. We start moving people out, a few at a time. Not everyone at once, that would be noticed, but families, small groups. We hide them here in the caves, then move them onto boats that take them north. It'll take time, but if we're careful, we could get dozens of people away before Harrow even realizes what's happening. Benjamin considered this. That requires help. People with boats willing to risk their lives. Money for bribes and supplies. Coordination. I know people, Sarah said. Been making connections for years, just in case. There's a Methodist minister in Natchez, Reverend Walsh, who preaches against slavery every Sunday. There's a riverboat captain named Dawson, who lost his son to yellow fever and blames the plantation system. There's a free black woman in town, Harriet Moss, who's helped more runaways than anyone knows. They'll help if we ask. And the weapons? Benjamin asked. The ammunition stores you mentioned? Insurance, Sarah said. In case it goes wrong. In case we need to fight our way out. But fighting is the last option, Benjamin. Freedom's not about winning battles. It's about surviving long enough to get somewhere they can't bring you back from. Benjamin walked back to the fire, his shadow huge on the cave walls. This is more complicated than killing overseers. Yes, it's probably going to fail, probably. But it gives people a chance, the first real chance most of them will ever have. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. All right, we do it your way. But I'm not stopping my count. 7 more names, 7 more deaths. That part isn't negotiable. I wouldn't expect it to be, Sarah said, but we make those deaths count for more than revenge. Each time you strike, we use the chaos to move people, to gather supplies, to get closer to ready. Your vengeance becomes our cover. When do we start? Tonight. Elijah takes me back, and tomorrow I start making contact with the people we need. You keep doing what you're doing, but on a schedule we agree on. 3 days between strikes gives us time to prepare, to move people, while everyone's distracted by fear. Benjamin looked at Elijah. You've been helping me already, moving supplies down here, watching the patrols. Why? Elijah's simple-minded mask slipped completely away, revealing a sharp intelligence that had been hidden for decades. Because I'm tired of pretending, tired of playing the fool so white men will ignore me. You came here and did what none of us had the courage to do. You stood up. You fought back. That makes you either brave or crazy, but either way it makes you someone worth following. Following? Benjamin shook his head. I'm no leader. You don't get to decide that, Sarah said. People follow who they follow. You killed 5 overseers who everyone thought were untouchable. You vanished like a ghost. You're already a legend. Question is whether you're going to be a legend who died for nothing or a legend who changed everything. The fire crackled, sending up sparks that disappeared into the darkness above. Outside the cave, the Mississippi River rolled past, patient and eternal, carrying water and secrets toward the Gulf of Mexico. And in that hidden chamber beneath the earth, 3 people made plans that would either free hundreds or get them all killed. Day 16, Benjamin said. That's when the next name on my list comes due. Thomas Walsh. He held my head down while they heated the cuffs. Thomas Walsh, Sarah repeated. He does the morning patrol of the East Fields, checks the irrigation channels. He'll be alone. Not for long. Sarah stood, her joints popping. I need to get back before dawn. People will notice if I'm missing. Elijah, can you guide me out? Yes, but Sarah, one more thing. Elijah reached into his ragged shirt and pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small wooden carving. It was a cross, but not like the Christian crosses. This one was older, rougher, with symbols carved into its surface that seemed to shift in the firelight. My grandmother made this, Elijah said, from wood that came from a tree struck by lightning. She said it carried protection, that it could turn back evil. I want Benjamin to have it. Benjamin took the carving, turning it over in his large hands. I don't believe in magic. Don't have to believe, Elijah said. Just have to carry it. Grandmother said the old gods don't need faith, they just need respect. Sarah watched Benjamin tuck the carving into his pocket. She didn't believe in magic either, not really. But she believed in symbols, in the power of objects to remind people of who they were and what they were fighting for. And maybe that was magic enough. 3 days, Sarah said as Elijah led her toward the passage that would take them back to the surface. We meet here again after you take Walsh. Bring us a count of how many people you think can make the journey north. We'll start with the children and the elderly, the ones most at risk. And the weapons? I'll work on that. Reverend Walsh will know people. Dawson might have access to arms through his riverboat connections. We'll find a way. They left Benjamin alone in the cave, the fire burning low, the sound of the underground river his only companion. He sat for a long time, thinking about what Sarah had said, about being a symbol as well as a man. He'd never wanted that. He'd only wanted to be free, to not be beaten and broken and treated as less than human. But maybe that's what symbols were made of. People who wanted simple things and found themselves caught up in complicated ones. People who stood up when everyone else stayed down, not because they were brave, but because they couldn't do anything else. He pulled out the wooden cross Elijah had given him, studying it in the dying firelight. The symbols carved into it were unfamiliar, older than any language he knew. But there was something comforting about it, a weight that felt right in his hand. Old gods, he murmured. If you're listening, I could use the help. Not for me, for them, for the people who've forgotten what hope feels like. The fire crackled. The river flowed, and somewhere above, in the darkness before dawn, 7 men slept fitfully, waiting for death to come calling with Benjamin Cross's face. Thomas Walsh died on schedule, 3 days later, found at dawn with his neck broken in the east irrigation channel. The pattern held, the positioning identical to the others, the message clear. But this time, something was different. Tucked into Walsh's shirt pocket was a piece of paper with a single word written in charcoal. 12. Tucker stood over the body as the sun rose, the paper trembling in his hand. The word was a promise and a countdown. 12 men had been in the forge. 6 were now dead. 6 remained, and they all knew their names were on Benjamin Cross's list. We're leaving, Peter Marsh announced that morning, throwing his possessions into a bag. 2 other overseers nodded their agreement, their faces pale. Harrow's not paying us enough to die. Let him find someone else to manage his damn plantation. You run now, you'll be branded cowards, Tucker said, but his voice lacked conviction. Part of him wanted to run too, wanted to put as many miles between himself and this cursed place as possible. Better a living coward than a dead brave man, Marsh replied. Walsh makes 6. Every 3 days another one of us dies. We've got maybe 2 weeks left unless we get out now. They left that afternoon, riding hard for Natchez, leaving Harrow with fewer men and more fear. The remaining overseers, Tucker included, moved into the main house, refusing to sleep in their usual quarters. They barricaded the doors, posted armed guards in shifts, and jumped at every sound. But the real action was happening where they weren't looking. Sarah moved through the quarters with quiet purpose, speaking to specific people in whispers that couldn't be overheard. She identified families ready to run, people young and strong enough to make the journey north, but desperate enough to risk everything for freedom. Moses and his mother, a young couple expecting their first child, an old man who'd been sold away from his family decades ago and wanted to die free. 16 people in the first group, not enough to be obvious, but enough to make a difference. Reverend Walsh proved as helpful as Sarah had hoped. He arrived at the plantation under the guise of bringing Christian instruction to the enslaved, a practice Harrow tolerated because it made him look benevolent. But during his visit, he passed Sarah a leather pouch containing $50 in silver coins and the name of a safe house in Natchez, run by Quakers. The Captain Dawson will be at the river landing in 4 nights, Walsh whispered, while pretending to read scripture. Midnight. He'll wait 1 hour, no longer. Can you get people there? We'll get them there, Sarah confirmed. The weapons proved harder. Dawson had a few rifles, old militia surplus he'd bought years ago, but nothing that could arm a real revolt. The Confederate ammunition stores, Sarah remembered, had been moved or depleted. They'd have to make do with what they could gather, farm implements turned into weapons, knives stolen from the kitchen, a few axes from the woodshop. It wasn't much, but it was something. And something was more than they'd had before. On the night of day 19, Benjamin emerged from the caves to claim his 7th victim. Daniel Foster had been the youngest of the 12 men in the forge, barely 20 years old, recently arrived from Virginia. He'd laughed the loudest when Benjamin's flesh burned, trying to prove himself to the older overseers. Benjamin found him on patrol near the tobacco barns, walking with false confidence in the darkness. Foster never heard Benjamin coming. One moment he was alone. The next, Benjamin's hand was on his shoulder, spinning him around. "Please," Foster whispered, seeing death in Benjamin's eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to do it. Tucker made me." "Everyone's sorry when they're the one being hurt," Benjamin said quietly. "Remember that feeling when you see what comes next." Foster's scream cut off abruptly. His body joined the others, positioned with the same careful respect, the same broken neck, the same open eyes staring at stars he'd never see again. But while Benjamin was hunting Foster, Sarah was moving her 16 chosen people through the darkness. Elijah led them in small groups, threading through paths he'd memorized over decades, avoiding the patrols, staying invisible. It took hours to get everyone to the caves, but by midnight, 16 souls stood in the underground cathedral, staring at the river that would carry them toward freedom. Benjamin returned to find them waiting. He stopped at the chamber's entrance, surprised by the crowd. Children clung to their parents, old people leaned on walking sticks. Everyone looked terrified and hopeful in equal measure. "This is what we talked about," Sarah said, standing beside Benjamin. "First group. Captain Dawson's waiting at the landing with his boat. They leave tonight." Benjamin looked at the faces staring at him, seeing the mix of fear and desperate hope. These weren't warriors. They were farmers and laborers, mothers and children, people who'd been beaten down so long they'd almost forgotten what standing up looked like. "The river's dangerous at night," Benjamin said. "The current's strong. If something goes wrong, if you're caught, they'll kill you. Harrow won't just bring you back, he'll make an example." "We know the risks," Moses's mother said. Her name was Ruth, and she held her son close. "But staying is dying too, just slower. At least this way we got a chance." "You're sure?" Benjamin asked. "Once you go, there's no coming back." "Never wanted to come back," the old man said. His name was Samuel, and his voice was rough as tree bark. "This place took everything from me. Time I took something back." Elijah stepped forward. "The boat's waiting. We need to go now, while Foster's death has everyone distracted. They'll be searching the plantation, looking for you, Benjamin. Perfect time to move." The journey through the caves took an hour. 16 people moving single file through passages that sometimes required crawling, sometimes wading through water. Benjamin led the way, his great strength useful for lifting children over obstacles, steadying the elderly on slippery stones. They emerged from a hidden opening in the riverbank, kudzu and willow branches concealing the entrance. The Mississippi spread before them, dark and vast under a quarter moon. 100 yards downstream, a small steamboat sat anchored in the current, its lights extinguished, waiting. "That's the Meridian," Elijah whispered. "Dawson's boat. He runs cargo between Natchez and Memphis, but he's been helping runaways for years. Lost his son to cholera working on a plantation. Turned him against the whole system." They moved along the shoreline, staying in the shadows of the willow trees until they reached the boat. A figure appeared on deck, a tall man with a grey beard and weathered face. "You're late," Captain Dawson said quietly. "Thought you weren't coming." "Had trouble with patrols," Elijah replied. "We got 16. Dawson's eyes widened slightly. 16? I was expecting maybe 6 or 7. I don't know if I can. You'll manage, Sarah said firmly. These people are leaving tonight. You're the only way north. Dawson looked at the group, saw the determination and desperation, and nodded. All right, but it'll be tight, and we'll have to move fast. Patrols check the river at dawn. Loading 16 people onto the boat took precious minutes. The children went first, handed up carefully, then the elderly, then the adults. Benjamin and Elijah kept watch on the riverbank, rifles they'd stolen from the plantation's supply shed, ready in case of trouble. When everyone was aboard, Captain Dawson gestured for Benjamin and Sarah to join them. You should come too, both of you. They'll figure out you helped soon enough. Benjamin shook his head. Can't. Still have 5 names on my list. 5 men who need to answer. You're choosing revenge over freedom. I'm choosing to make sure they can't do to anyone else what they did to me. But mostly, Benjamin looked at Sarah, I'm choosing to make sure more people get out. 16 tonight. Another group in a week. Keep doing this until either everyone's free or I'm dead. Sarah smiled at him. Stubborn fool. Learned from the best. Dawson started the boat's engine, keeping it quiet as possible. 3 weeks, he said to Sarah. I'll be back in 3 weeks. Same spot, same time. How many more can you have ready? 20, Sarah said. Maybe 30 if we push it. Make it 20. Better to move careful than get caught moving fast. The boat pulled away from the shore, sliding into the current like a ghost. Benjamin and Sarah watched from the bank until it disappeared around the river bend, carrying 16 souls toward a future they'd never dared imagine before tonight. That's one group, Sarah said. About 284 more people to go. Benjamin looked at her. You planning to empty the whole plantation? Every last person if I can, but it'll take time. Months, maybe. We need to keep Harrow and Tucker distracted, keep them looking the wrong way. My list should help with that. They made their way back through the caves, exhaustion pulling at their bones. Dawn would come in a few hours, and with it, the discovery of Foster's body. The plantation would be in chaos again, fear ratcheting higher, the remaining overseers growing more paranoid. When they reached the main chamber, Elijah had a small fire burning and coffee brewing from beans he'd stolen from the main house. The 3 of them sat in silence, drinking the bitter coffee, feeling the weight of what they'd accomplished and what still lay ahead. 5 more names, Benjamin finally said. Tucker's next, day 22. He's the one who led it, who gave the orders. He dies the worst. Tucker won't be easy, Elijah said. He's smart, paranoid, armed. He's moved into the main house, never goes anywhere alone. Everyone's alone eventually, Benjamin replied. Everyone sleeps. Everyone has a moment when they let their guard down. I just have to wait for his. Sarah poured more coffee. While you're waiting, we need to think about what happens when you're done. When all 12 are dead, Harrow will bring in the army. They'll burn this place looking for you. Then we need to be gone before that happens. Not just hidden, gone. Every person who wants to leave, on boats heading north. That's a lot of boats, a lot of coordination. Dawson can't do it alone. Then we find more captains, Benjamin said. You said there were others who helped runaways. We need all of them. Multiple boats, multiple trips. Empty this plantation before they can bring in soldiers. Elijah pulled out a scrap of paper. Charcoal marks showing a rough map. I've been thinking about this. There's 4 other captains I know of who might help. The Ledbetter brothers who run freight. Captain Morrison who does a passenger service. The Wilson woman who owns a ferry. And there's river pirates too, men who don't care about laws and might work for money. How much money? Benjamin asked. Sarah pulled out the pouch Reverend Walsh had given her. We got $50. That ain't enough for 4 captains and however many trips we'd need. Then we find more, Benjamin said. Harrow keeps cash in his study, emergency funds for buying supplies, paying debts. Tucker probably knows where it is. You planning to rob them now too? Why not? They stole our labor for generations. Time for some of it to come back. They planned through the night, making lists, calculating numbers, working out logistics that seemed impossible, but might just be achievable if everything went perfectly, which it wouldn't. Something would go wrong. Someone would get caught, people would die, but some people would also get free, and that made the risk worth taking. As false dawn began to lighten the sky above ground, Sarah and Elijah prepared to return to the quarters before their absence was noticed. Benjamin walked them to the passage entrance. "Be careful," he told them. "If Tucker or Harrow suspect what you're doing, they won't hesitate to hang you." "They won't suspect," Sarah said. "We've been invisible to them for so long they can't see us now, even when we're right in front of them. That's our advantage." She hugged Benjamin, her small frame barely reaching his chest. "You stay alive. We need you. These people need you. Not just as a killer, but as a reminder that we don't have to accept what they tell us we are." Benjamin watched them disappear into the passage, then returned to his chamber. He pulled out the wooden cross Elijah had given him, running his fingers over the ancient symbols carved into its surface. "5 more," he said to the darkness. "5 more. And then we see if freedom's really possible, or if it's just another story we tell ourselves to make the suffering bearable." The underground river flowed, patient and eternal. Above ground, another overseer's body cooled in the pre-dawn air. And somewhere between earth and water, between vengeance and hope, Benjamin Cross waited for day 22. Tucker knew death was coming for him. He felt it in the way the remaining overseers looked at him, measuring him for a grave. He saw it in the faces of the enslaved people who no longer kept their eyes downcast when he passed. He heard it in the silence that followed him everywhere, a weight of anticipation that made his skin crawl. 7 men dead, 5 remained, and Tucker was the prize Benjamin Cross wanted most. He'd stopped sleeping at night. Instead, he dozed in shifts during the day, never for more than an hour, always in the main house with armed men nearby. At night, he paced the halls like a caged animal, rifle in hand, starting at every creak of wood, every whisper of wind. Harrow was barely better. The plantation owner had aged a decade in 3 weeks, his face gaunt, his hands shaking when he tried to light his evening cigar. The cotton crop was behind schedule, half the workforce distracted by fear and hope, the remaining overseers too paranoid to effectively manage anyone. "We should burn it down," Harrow said one night, his voice slurred with whiskey. He and Tucker sat in the study, curtains drawn, candles guttering. "Burn the whole goddamn plantation. The fields, the quarters, everything. Smoke out Benjamin Cross and end this." "And throw away your fortune?" Tucker asked. "Everything you've built? What good is fortune if I'm dead? What good is a plantation if the slaves are running it?" Tucker had noticed that too, the subtle shifts in power, the way work was being done at a slower pace, the way people moved in groups now instead of isolation. There was organization happening beneath the surface, coordination that shouldn't be possible among people, kept deliberately divided. "It's not just Benjamin," Tucker said. "There's something else going on. Someone's organizing them. Then find out who and make an example. Publicly, we need to remind them what happens to rebels." But who could they make an example of? The obvious leaders, the strong men who might organize resistance, seemed genuinely clueless about Benjamin's location. Tucker had interrogated dozens, using methods that left scars, and found nothing. Either they truly didn't know, or they were better at keeping secrets than he'd believed possible. Sarah was the key, Tucker decided. He'd seen the old woman moving through the quarters with unusual purpose, speaking quietly to specific people. She'd been on the plantation longer than anyone, knew everyone, held respect that even the overseers couldn't quite break. If anyone was coordinating resistance, it was her. He confronted her on day 21, cornering her near the well while she drew water. "You know where he is," Tucker said, his hand resting on the pistol at his belt. Sarah looked at him with ancient eyes that held no fear. "Who?" "Don't play games with me, old woman. Benjamin Cross. You know where he's hiding." "Even if I did, why would I tell you?" So you can kill him like you tried before? Like you've killed so many others? Tucker grabbed her arm, squeezing hard enough to bruise. I can make you talk. You can hurt me, Sarah agreed. Beat me, torture me, kill me even. But I lived 70 years on this plantation, survived things that would break you. You think pain scares me now? There was something in her voice, a certainty that made Tucker release her arm. She wasn't bluffing. He could torture her to death, and she wouldn't tell him anything. That kind of strength was dangerous, infectious. It was the kind of thing that spread through people like fire through dry grass. He's going to kill me, Tucker said, and was surprised to hear the fear in his own voice. Day 22. Tomorrow. That's when I'm scheduled to die. Then you better make peace with whatever God you believe in, Sarah said, picking up her water bucket. Because Benjamin Cross keeps his promises. She walked away, leaving Tucker standing by the well, feeling the weight of his mortality like a stone in his chest. He'd killed men before, broken bodies and spirits without a second thought, but he'd always been the one holding the power, the one dealing out punishment. Being on the receiving end was different. It made him understand, perhaps for the first time, what he'd done to others. The understanding didn't make him repentant, it just made him angry. That night, Tucker gathered the 4 remaining overseers who'd been in the forge. Richard Moore, who'd heated the iron bars, Jacob Fleming, who'd hammered the ankle chains, Peter Walsh, brother to Thomas Walsh, who'd held Benjamin's legs, and Samuel Grant, who'd laughed while Benjamin burned. We're the last 5, Tucker said. They stood in Harrow's study, the door barred, weapons loaded. Tomorrow I'm supposed to die. 3 days after that, one of you, then the next and the next, until Benjamin Cross has killed us all. So what do we do? Moore asked. He was a thick man with a drinker's red face, fear making his hands shake. We can't hide forever, we can't run, everyone knows what we did. If Benjamin doesn't kill us, reputation will. No one will hire overseers who ran from a slave. We don't run, Tucker said. We end this. We stop reacting and start acting. Benjamin Cross wants to hunt us. We hunt him first. How? Fleming demanded. He's a ghost. We've searched everywhere. Even the dogs can't track him. Then we use bait he can't resist, Tucker said. We know he defended a child before. We know he cares about the people here. That's why he's doing this. So we take hostages. Round up the ones we know he interacted with, the ones he might care about. The boy Moses, the old woman Sarah, anyone else who might matter to him. We chain them in the center of the quarters where everyone can see. And we make it clear that if Benjamin Cross doesn't surrender by dawn, we start shooting them one by one. The men were quiet, processing the brutality of the plan. Even by plantation standards, it was extreme. But fear makes men cruel, and they were drowning in fear. Harrow will approve this, Walsh asked. Harrow will approve anything that keeps him alive, Tucker said. And if Benjamin refuses to surrender, if he lets people die to keep hiding, that breaks his legend, makes him look like a coward. Either way, we win. They began the roundup an hour before midnight, 6 armed men moving through the quarters, dragging people from their cabins. Moses and his mother Ruth, Sarah, who fought until they clubbed her unconscious, old Samuel, Elijah, who played his simple-minded role perfectly, seeming confused about why he was being taken. A dozen others, selected seemingly at random but actually chosen because Tucker had seen them talking to Sarah. They chained them all to posts driven into the ground in the central common area, iron shackles on wrists and ankles, guards positioned with rifles ready, torches burned in a circle, turning the scene into a grotesque theater. The rest of the plantation's enslaved population was forced to watch from a distance, held back by more armed guards. "Benjamin Cross!" Tucker shouted into the darkness. "I know you can hear me. I know you're watching. You've got until dawn to surrender yourself, or these people start dying, starting with the old woman who's been helping you." Silence answered him. The torches crackled. The chained people stood or sat in resignation, their faces showing they'd known this was coming eventually. Moses cried quietly, his mother whispering comfort despite her own terror. Tucker waited, watching the darkness beyond the torchlight, his rifle ready. Part of him hoped Benjamin wouldn't come, that he'd stay hidden, because that would prove Tucker's point that slaves couldn't be trusted, couldn't organize, couldn't sustain resistance. They were animals that needed controlling, nothing more. Another part of him hoped Benjamin would come, because at least then this would end. One way or another, the waiting would be over. Midnight passed, then 1 in the morning, then 2. The chained people dozed where they could, exhaustion overtaking fear. The guards yawned, attention wavering. Tucker paced, rage and terror warring in his chest. At 3 in the morning, Benjamin Cross walked out of the darkness. He came from the direction of the cotton fields, emerging into the torchlight like a conjured demon. His clothes were torn, his body marked with half-healed burns and scars, his face set in an expression of absolute calm. He carried no weapons, his hands empty at his sides. "Let them go," Benjamin said, his voice carrying across the silent common area. "This is between you and me." Tucker raised his rifle, aiming at Benjamin's chest. "You surrendering? I'm offering a trade, me for them. That's what you want, isn't it? What I want is to see you hang. What I want is to watch you suffer, like you made us suffer, jumping at shadows, waiting for death. Then you know exactly how we've felt for our entire lives," Benjamin said. "Every day waiting for the whip, the chain, the noose. Every day wondering if this is when we die. You had 3 weeks of that fear. We've had generations." Tucker's finger tightened on the trigger. He could shoot Benjamin right now, end this before it went further. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the way Benjamin stood, unafraid, offering himself. Maybe it was the 300 people watching from the darkness, witnesses to whatever happened next. "You killed 7 men, Tucker said. 7 men who tortured me. 7 men who would have killed me and thought nothing of it. I gave them the same mercy they showed me. None. You call that justice? I call it balance." Tucker lowered his rifle slightly. "You think surrendering changes anything? You think Harrow will let any of these people live after what you've done? The moment I have you in chains, he'll hang a dozen people to make his point. Your surrender doesn't save them. It just adds one more body to the count." Benjamin smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "Who said I'm surrendering?" The torches went out simultaneously, plunging the common area into darkness. It happened too fast to be accident, too coordinated to be chance. Someone had been waiting for Benjamin's signal, ready to act. In the darkness, chaos erupted. The sound of chains breaking, metal striking metal, people shouting, guards firing blindly. Tucker fired his rifle toward where Benjamin had been standing, but the big man was no longer there. Something massive hit Tucker from the side, driving him to the ground. Benjamin's hands found his throat, squeezing with crushing force. "This is for the child you tried to beat," Benjamin said quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "For every person you've hurt, for every life you've broken." Tucker tried to fight back, but it was like fighting a mountain. Benjamin's strength was overwhelming, his grip unbreakable. Tucker's vision began to narrow, darkness closing in from the edges. "Please," Tucker managed to choke out, "I'm sorry." "So were the others," Benjamin said. "Being sorry doesn't undo what you did." "Dozie's." The last thing Tucker saw was Benjamin's face above him, calm and sad and utterly certain. Then the pressure on his throat became unbearable, his vision went black, and he died knowing that sometimes monsters were real and justice had a human face. When the torches were relit minutes later, Tucker lay dead in the center of the common area, his neck broken, his eyes open to the stars. Benjamin was gone. So were the prisoners, their chains broken and scattered. And standing around the perimeter of the common area, holding improvised weapons and faces set with determination, were 50 of the enslaved people who decided the time for hiding was over. In his study, Silas Harrow heard the gunshots and shouting. He locked his door, loaded his pistol, and waited for whatever came next, knowing that his world was ending and there was nothing he could do to stop it. In the caves beneath the plantation, Sarah treated Benjamin's fresh wounds, while Elijah organized the freed prisoners. They'd gotten everyone out, the distraction providing perfect cover to move nearly 30 people into the tunnel system. 8 dead, Benjamin said, wincing as Sarah wrapped a cut on his arm. 4 more to go. No, Sarah said firmly. No more hunting. We accelerate the plan. We get everyone out now, tonight, before they bring in the army. Tucker was the leader. With him dead, the rest will fall apart. The list isn't complete. The list doesn't matter anymore. You've done enough. You've shown them they can be beaten. Now we need to save lives, not take them. Benjamin looked at her, saw the wisdom and determination in her ancient eyes, and slowly nodded. How many people can we move tonight? Captain Dawson's due back in 2 days, but I sent word through Reverend Walsh. He's bringing 4 other boats. If we can get people to the river, we can move maybe 150 at once. That's half the plantation. I know, it'll be chaos, but it might work. The overseers are terrified, disorganized. Harrow's locked in his house. If we move fast, we could empty most of this place before they figure out what's happening. Elijah spoke up from where he was distributing supplies. I've been talking to people. They ready. They scared, but they ready. Word spread about the boats, about the safe houses up north. Folks are packing what little they got, saying goodbye to graves, preparing to run. Benjamin stood, testing his injured arm. Then we run, all of us together. No more waiting, no more planning. We do it now. Now? Sarah asked. Tonight? Tonight. Before they recover, before they bring in reinforcements. We move everyone we can to the caves, then to the river. The boats take them north in waves. And anyone who wants to stay and fight, we give them the weapons we've gathered. Fight? Elijah looked uncertain. That's suicide. Maybe, Benjamin agreed. But running is risky too. Some people won't make it. Some boats will be caught. We need a distraction, something to keep the army busy while the others escape. You're talking about war, Sarah said. I'm talking about freedom. Real freedom. Not just for a few, but for everyone. Yes, it'll be bloody. Yes, people will die. But they're dying anyway, just slower. At least this way, they die fighting. The 3 of them looked at each other, understanding the weight of what they were proposing. It wasn't a careful escape or a measured rebellion. It was all or nothing, burn the bridges, point of no return action that would either free hundreds or get them all killed. I'm 70 years old, Sarah finally said. I ain't running. I stay and fight. Buy time for the young ones to get away. I stay too, Elijah said. Been pretending to be simple for 40 years. Time to show them what I really am. Benjamin smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached his eyes. Then let's give them a war they'll never forget. The word spread through the quarters like lightning through storm clouds. Tonight, everyone who wanted freedom, gather what you could carry and move to the river. Everyone who wanted to fight, meet at the forge. The time for hiding was over. The time for choosing had come. By midnight, the plantation had transformed into controlled chaos. Families moved through the darkness in small groups, guided by people who knew the paths to the caves. Children were carried, the elderly supported, everyone moving with desperate speed toward the underground chambers that would lead them to the river. At the forge, Benjamin stood before 30 men and women who'd chosen to stay and fight. They were armed with whatever could be found or made. Axes, hammers, scythes sharpened to razor edges, a handful of rifles stolen from the guards, knives from the kitchens. It wasn't much against trained soldiers, but it was more than they'd ever had before. You all know what this means, Benjamin said, his voice carrying in the enclosed space. We make our stand here. We hold them as long as we can. Give everyone else time to reach the boats. Some of us won't survive the night. Maybe none of us will. But we'll die free, and that's more than most of us ever hoped for. "We're with you," a man named Isaac said. He'd been a field worker for 30 years, his back scarred from countless whippings. "Win or lose, we're with you." Sarah stood beside Benjamin, her 70-year-old body somehow radiating strength. "The boats arrive at dawn. We need to hold until then. 4 hours, maybe 5. After that, anyone still alive runs for the river." "Okay, what about Harrow?" someone asked. "What about the overseer in the main house?" "Leave them," Benjamin said. "They're locked in there like rats in a cage. Let them stay. Our fight is bigger than revenge now." Elijah had positioned sentries on the roads leading to the plantation, ready to signal when reinforcements arrived from Natchez. They estimated they had maybe 2 hours before word reached the town. Another hour for troops to mobilize, another hour for them to arrive. 4 hours total. Just enough time, if everything went perfectly. At the river landing, Captain Dawson arrived with his boat, joined by 4 others. The Ledbetter Brothers freight barge, Morrison's passenger steamer, the Wilson ferry, and a surprising addition, a pirate vessel captained by a woman named Black Martha, a freed slave who turned to river piracy and agreed to help for a share of the money stolen from Harrow's safe. "How many we taking?" Dawson asked as the first group of refugees emerged from the caves. "Everyone we can," Sarah replied. She'd left the forge to coordinate the evacuation, her organizational skills proving invaluable. 150 at least, maybe 200 if we pack tight. "That many people will be spotted for sure," Martha said. She was a tall woman with iron-grey hair and a cutlass at her belt. "Patrols will see us. Word will spread." "Let it spread," Sarah said. "By the time anyone reacts, we'll be 50 miles upriver, and the ones staying behind will keep them too busy to chase." Loading 200 people onto 5 boats while maintaining silence and order was nearly impossible, but they managed it. Children first, then elderly, then families, then anyone else who'd chosen to run. Some people cried saying goodbye to family members staying to fight. Others seemed numb with disbelief that freedom was really happening. Moses and his mother were among the first aboard. The boy looked back at the shore, at the plantation that had been his entire world, at Benjamin standing tall in the torchlight. "Will we see you again?" Moses called out. Benjamin waved. "Maybe. But if not, you live well, you hear me? You live so well it makes up for all the years we couldn't." At 2 in the morning, the first boat pulled away from the landing, then the second, then the third. By 3, all 5 boats were moving upriver, carrying nearly 200 souls toward freedom, toward Union states, toward lives they'd barely dared imagine. And on the plantation, those who remained prepared for war. The alarm bells started ringing at 3:30. Someone in the main house had finally realized what was happening, that the quarters were emptying, that something massive was underway. Harrow's voice could be heard shouting orders, demanding someone tell him what was going on. The 4 remaining overseers who'd been in the forge emerged from the main house: Moore, Fleming, Walsh, and Grant. They were armed and frightened, trying to organize a response with guards who were themselves starting to question whether staying loyal to Harrow was worth dying for. Benjamin watched them from the forge, Sarah and Elijah beside him, 30 fighters ready behind them. "This is it," Benjamin said. "Once we start, there's no going back." "Never was going back," Sarah replied. "Only forward." Benjamin picked up a torch and walked out of the forge toward the main house. The other fighters followed, spreading out, moving with surprising coordination. They'd spent the last hour planning their approach, identifying defensive positions, preparing for what came next. "Moore! Fleming! Walsh! Grant!" Benjamin's voice boomed across the plantation grounds. "You 4 are the last names on my list. You can run now, leave this place and never come back. Or you can stay and die. Your choice." Moore raised his rifle, hands shaking. "You're one man against all of us." "Look behind me," Benjamin said. The overseer looked and saw 30 people standing in the torchlight, armed, determined, no longer showing the deference and fear that had kept them enslaved. and behind them, emerging from the shadows, came more. 50 people, 100. Everyone who hadn't gotten on the boats. Everyone who decided that if they were going to die anyway, they might as well die fighting. 200 people stood facing the main house, representing generations of accumulated rage, centuries of injustice, an entire people's desperate need for freedom. Moore lowered his rifle. So did Fleming and Walsh. Grant tried to hold on to his, but his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't aim. They were slavers and overseers, brutal men who'd built careers on violence. But they weren't soldiers. They weren't prepared for war against people who had nothing left to lose. "We're leaving," Moore said, backing toward the stables where horses were kept. "We're done. Harrow can handle this himself." They fled. The last 4 men on Benjamin's list, running for their lives, abandoning the plantation to its fate. And in his study, Silas Harrow watched through a window as his empire collapsed, as the people he'd treated as property became an army that surrounded his house with revenge in their eyes. Benjamin approached the main house, the crowd behind him. He could see Harrow in the window, pistol in hand, face pale with terror. "Silas Harrow," Benjamin called out, "you spent years breaking people, breaking families, breaking spirits. You built an empire on suffering. Tonight that empire ends." "What do you want?" Harrow shouted from inside. "Money? I'll give you money. Freedom papers? I'll sign them. Whatever you want, just don't kill me." "We don't want anything from you," Benjamin said. "We already took what we needed." "This," he gestured at the plantation around them, "this is yours. Your house, your fields, your cotton. You can keep all of it. We just wanted one thing you thought you'd never have to give." "What?" "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We don't need you or your permission or your papers. We're free because we choose to be, and there's nothing you can do about it." Benjamin turned his back on the house and walked toward the forge. The crowd followed, leaving Harrow alone in his mansion, monarch of an empty kingdom, master of nothing. In the forge, they lit a bonfire. Not to burn anything down, but to celebrate. To mark this moment when people who'd been told they were property decided they were human beings instead. They sang songs that had been passed down through generations, songs their ancestors brought on slave ships, songs that had survived every attempt to erase them. As dawn broke over the Mississippi River, federal troops arrived from Natchez, a unit of 30 soldiers led by a young lieutenant who'd been sent to put down a slave rebellion. What he found instead confused him. The plantation was intact. The main house stood undamaged. There was no burning, no killing, no violence beyond the bodies of 8 overseers who'd been killed over the past 3 weeks. But the quarters were empty. 200 people simply gone, vanished in the night, leaving behind only chains and the things they couldn't carry. "Where is everyone?" the lieutenant asked Harrow, who'd emerged from his house looking like he'd aged another decade overnight. "Gone," Harrow said hoarsely. "Boats, river, they're gone." "How many?" "Most of them. 200, maybe more." The lieutenant did quick mental math. 200 people on 5 boats, hours of head start, moving up a river with 1,000 places to hide or transfer to other vessels. Following them would be nearly impossible. Finding them all would take months and resources the army didn't have. "And the ringleaders?" the lieutenant asked. "This Benjamin Cross we heard about?" "Gone too, all of them." "So you want us to hunt escaped slaves on a river where we don't know which boats they're on, going to destinations we don't know, protected by people we can't identify?" Harrow looked at the lieutenant with hollow eyes. "I want my property back." "Sir, with respect, by the time we organize a search, they could be anywhere from here to Illinois, and even if we found them, bringing back 200 people who don't want to be brought back would require a military campaign I'm not authorized to conduct." Which was how Silas Harrow learned that empires built on human suffering can collapse in a single night. That strength lies not in chains and whips, but in the collective will of people who decide they're done being afraid. That a man can own land and cotton and buildings, but he can never really own another human soul. Benjamin Cross stood on the deck of Captain Dawson's boat as the sun rose over the Mississippi River, watching Tennessee slide by on the eastern shore. Elijah was beside him, Sarah on his other side, all three of them exhausted and injured, but alive. "What happens now?" Elijah asked. "We got 200 people heading north with no money, no plan, no idea what comes next." "Same thing that's always happened," Sarah said. "We survive. We adapt. We find work, build communities, make new lives. It won't be easy. North ain't paradise, and plenty of people up there hate us just as much as the ones down south. But we'll be free," Benjamin said. "That's worth fighting for, worth dying for, if it comes to that." "You think the others made it?" Elijah asked. "The ones who stayed to fight?" "Some of them," Benjamin said. "Some didn't. But they bought us time, gave us the chance to get away. That matters. That means something." No, they watched the river flow, carrying them toward an uncertain future. Behind them, 8 overseers were dead, and a plantation lay empty. Ahead of them lay cities they'd never seen, lives they'd never imagined, challenges they couldn't anticipate. But they were free, and that made all the difference. In the years that followed, the story of Benjamin Cross spread through the South like wildfire. The man who broke iron chains with his bare hands, the ghost who hunted overseers in the night, the leader who freed 200 people in a single rebellion. Some of the stories were true, some were exaggerated, some were pure myth, but they all served the same purpose: reminding enslaved people that resistance was possible, that masters could be beaten, that the system that seemed eternal and unbreakable could actually be shattered by courage and determination. Benjamin never told his story. He didn't need to. He worked in factories in Cincinnati, using his great strength to honest ends. He married a woman who'd escaped from a different plantation and had 3 children who were born free and never knew chains. On stormy nights, when thunder rolled across the Ohio River like drums, people said they could see a figure standing in the rain, watching the water flow south toward the land that had tried to break him. A giant of a man, bare-chested and scarred, silent and free. They called him a beast once. The enslaved called him freedom given flesh. And in the years that followed, when the Civil War came and changed everything, when slavery was finally abolished and 4 million people were freed, old folks would tell young ones about Benjamin Cross, about the man who proved that chains could be broken, that tyrants could fall, that human beings would always choose freedom no matter the cost. The iron cross he'd twisted from his chains was never found. Some said it was buried at Harrow Plantation. Others claimed Benjamin took it with him north, a reminder of what he'd survived and overcome. A few believed it was thrown into the Mississippi River, an offering to the water and the ancestors who'd made the journey before, but its meaning remained clear, passed down through generations as a symbol of resistance, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit. No 12 men could hold Benjamin Cross. No chains could bind him. No system could break him, because in the end, freedom isn't something that can be given or taken away by others. It's something that lives in the human heart, waiting for the moment when courage and circumstance align, when a person decides that enough is enough, when the impossible becomes inevitable. Benjamin Cross was that moment given human form. He was proof that one person could stand up, that resistance could succeed, that the arc of history bends toward justice when people are brave enough to pull it. And that's why his story survived. Not because it was unusual, though it was. Not because he was superhuman, though his strength was legendary, but because he represented something every enslaved person needed to believe: that freedom was possible, that oppressors could be defeated, that human dignity could never be fully destroyed no matter how hard the masters tried. In the end, 12 overseers couldn't subdue Benjamin Cross, even bound by iron, because iron breaks, chains split, prisons fail, and the human desire for freedom burns eternal, waiting only for someone brave enough to strike the first match. Benjamin Cross was that match, and the fire he started never fully went out.